Good evening, Wade.
Good morning, Rob. How is life treating you this fine day?
Very promising, my friend. How about you? How's the coffee and the stogies out there?
Oh, the coffee is all right. It didn't, my cappuccino didn't foam, so I think I'm being hexed.
Whoa, man. If
Mm.
they're attacking the cappuccino, then these are magical.
Must be.
Actually,
I'm
more, my
not sure.
friend.
If I had cows, I would know if they had quit milking.
Damn, man. Nobody does that to
Anyway,
brew in the morning.
oh yeah. But I also have my very best smokes. That's the Macanudo Crew Royale. Got a whole box in because victory.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we're going to do a little bit of populating, but today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Anathema Publishing Limited, and they're doing their official Kickstarter campaign for Jose Gabriel Alegre Sabogal's forthcoming book, Semselam. And through it, they're also doing a reprint of the Iao Fight iconography. This book has been so coveted by people because it literally just flew off the shelves. And you know, this crowdfunding campaign is to actually launch and return or to print out the book Semselam. But if it does succeed, they are going to do a second run of EAO, which people have just been chasing after. Now, if it's one thing I wanted to say about Anathema Publishing is they don't print garbage, all right? In other words, they do not print garbage. They are very artisanal with the way they present their books. So this Kickstarter campaign is being done in open endorsement by Magic.tv so that we're actually openly endorsing this because their books are works of art, man. You've seen it. You've seen their
I
books.
have.
Look,
I have.
and these
And
are
you're not going to get that kind of nonsense like airtight meditation masks. That's not a joke. I've seen that in a book.
exactly. So they take time with not just the content, which is already legendary, but with the presentation. And with these books, that's why they're asking for the Kickstarter campaign. They're not doing it because they're just looking for money. They want to stay true to their vision of offering top quality occult literary masterpieces. These are shelf toppers. These are things that, like, hey, look at my latest book from how to Anathema Press. I mean, these things really, really look beautiful, and they wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, like, I've spoken to Gabriel, great guy, and he actually told me about it in open conversation that he would rather not publish a book than publish a substandard book. So with this, it shows that Anathema Publishing Limited is leading the way in top quality occult books. Okay. And that's why they're doing this Kickstarter, because they really want to stick true to their visuals and their image and their, their mission and their, ideal of offering artisanal occult books with equally artisanal content. I mean, I have not come across a book of Anathema that has not blown me away.
Yeah, they have a lot of really good. Well, everything they have is good.
All right, just gonna do a bit of populating, finding Magickal, and we're just blasting this on our Instagram page. If you want to find us, we're on Instagram. You can see a lot of interesting content there. And also, there's also another special mention that I'd like to make about another person I'd like to give props to today who's sponsoring the show. And we're going to talk about them in a bit. But let's just get the show link because the gremlins are attacking us. So how cold is it out there right now, Wade?
I think it's about none degrees. I don't know what's going on. We had it was clear last night, so we had all this cold air roll in right around sunrise. It'll clear up in a little bit, but it's cold. Right, I'm kind of on a hill looking over the ocean, so it's very cold. But I got coffee, I got a cigar, I'm good.
All right, let's just get this. Alrighty, so that's on. And it's a little bit more population, and we should be good to go. So, okay,
All right.
the topic for tonight is finding a magical mentor. And this is a topic I think a lot of the newbies out there need to hear Because there's a lot of garbage out there, but there's also a lot of potential people who can teach you things.
So it's a lot of garbage people.
A lot of garbage
people. Is the problem?
Garbage too.
Well, the other thing with that is somebody might be a good magician, but if they're not the right one for you, it can be just as bad as having, someone who's just bad all around. They have to be the right fit for you.
I completely agree with you, my friend. And, I've had my own experiences with shitty teachers. I've had experiences with great teachers. And, one thing we're going to talk about is nowadays with the advent of, online education and stuff like that, does it still need to be Obi-Wan Kenobi style? It's like face-to-face. We're going to talk about that in a bit. Just doing one more minute of population, and then we should be good to go.
Yeah, I'm always a fan of one-on-one apprenticeship.
Mm-hmm.
Because, when you have the internet, the information age, it's real easy to just put up a website, say you have a school, I've got 6,000 students, and people sign in, and maybe my very first student is number 6,001.
True.
And people come in, and I'm just kind of regurgitating whatever it is that I've accumulated on the website, whether it's original content or not. But having the internet allows people to just mass produce all of this information to people, and the quality of the information itself is less relevant than the quality of the communication, because the information might all be the same, but each student has different needs.
All right, now before I forget, tonight's episode is also brought to you by Axel TORVENIUS, Goetia. Check him out on the internet, TORVENIUS. This Goetic deck, in your words, is the God's balls. Why? This deck not only comes with a lovely red glossed cover. You see how lovely that is? And
that is really something
within it. But if you purchase this deck, it comes with its very own magical triangle, which is cloth. So you can have your triangle wherever you're doing your work. Look at this. It's very beautiful, done by TORVENIUS. Where you can put the tarot card in, so you can actually do evocations with this deck. But that's not all. It also comes with a bloodstone seal of Solomon, which I've actually put on my altar, and this really awesome holder where you can take the seal of an hexagram of Solomon. It also comes with its very own hexagram of Solomon, and you place it in here so that you kind of have your already ready to wear hexagram of Solomon. Or if you get their deluxe edition, which I got, which is a bag full of all the spirits, you can take this out and replace it with any of the spirits you're working with. So now you actually have your very own necklace, or you have your very own means when you're doing the evocation. So you guys got to check out Axel TORVENIUS or TORVENIUS on either Etsy or on his website. He's got some amazing stuff. He was very professional working with me. Like our first batch of stuff got cock blocked by customs. They didn't let me have it. So he actually went out of his way and sent me another one free of charge. And although it took a couple of months, I finally got it, and I was really impressed with that. So let's get the show on the road. Wade, what was your first story like? Finding a magical mentor.
Oh my God. Finding a magical mentor didn't happen for the longest time. I was on my own, kind of out in the Appalachians. I was really just kind of struggling, having to mail order books. We didn't even have a store within several hundred miles. So I kind of had to get by with it. But the first time I actually found, a teacher found me. I'm another, that's another cliche that I find to be very true, is that when the student is ready, the master appears. So at that point I had just gotten to the Bay Area, and I was in Ancient Ways bookstore. Shout out to Ancient Ways.
Ancient Ways.
And, oh yes, made me. Most of what I am today is 80% from working at Ancient Ways. So I'm in the store, and I've been checking out all the occult bookstores in the area, And at the time, I was looking for the Golden Dawn because that was the only magical organization that I really knew about.
Yep.
So I'm walking around and I'm like seeing other books. I'm seeing a lot of Crowley books on the shelf and a lot of OTO stuff. And I asked the one guy about the OTO. I was like, well, you know, do you know anybody? How would I be able to join the OTO? And the guy said, are you a member? I said, no. And he's like, well, I don't think they exist. Yeah. And I thought, oh my God, now I got to find these guys, because he was being such a jerk about it. So I'm in Ancient Ways and I see a flyer for the OTO. And it says Gnostic Mass every Sunday at the Lima Lodge. And I'm looking and I was reading over it. I'm trying to figure out where this address is. And I gradually become aware of this looming presence over my shoulder. And I kind of turn and I'm like, hello? And this guy's like, looking for the OTO? And my first thought is like, oh my God, this is creepy as shit. Mm-hmm. But that turned out to be Ebony Onpu.
Damn.
And we spent the entire afternoon. He just schooled me on everything I needed to know about magical organizations, about cabals within the organizations. He actually lived a couple blocks away. We went to his house, had coffee, played chess, got high, and we went to the following week. I actually went to Gnostic Mass and loved it. And so that was kind of how I met Ebony, is he just sort of sprung up out of the shadows, because apparently I was ready for a real master, mm-hmm. which was neat. He did have his limitations, but...
Well, I was going to ask you, is it safe to say that in the practice of magic, chances are we won't just have one teacher now, will we?
Well, you'll have one that's what you need when you need it. Mm-hmm. Like I was saying, Ebony had his limitations, and I was quickly able, each teacher you run into is going to be like shifting gears in a car. Uh-huh. When you're in first gear, you find a first gear teacher. When your RPMs go beyond that, you upshift and the next one will appear. And you go as far as you're going to go with it. There's no top floor on it. It's basically as far as you want to go. You will always find, eventually, you'll always find a master who is there before you.
All right, now here's a question I'm going to ask you. What makes a good teacher?
Oh, you know, really, it's 100% about communication. Because I mean, everybody knows something. Everybody can teach something. Teaching is part of everybody's true will. I mean, you have the thing that you do, but part of that is also teaching. It's also bringing up the next generation to replace you when you're gone. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's even been times that, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know how many times I've actually been summoned as a teacher. Mm-hmm. Because I'll meet somebody, we'll start talking, and they were like, you know, I just did this spell to find a magical, you know, a master to teach me. And then 1 week later, I just meet you out of the blue. And that's actually happened quite a bit. So if you like can allow yourself to be summoned, it's really helpful for the next generation of magelings.
All right, so let's just go to some brass tacks, though. Okay, have you ever had any bad teachers? Yes or no?
I've had people that purported to be teachers, mm-hmm. and I was able to spot that that they're just not who I want as a teacher. I've had associates who claim to be teachers that I did not accept, but I haven't actually had a bad teacher who taught me bad things that sent me the wrong way.
All right.
I've always kind of had a knack for knowing people, but there's ways to tell if you find someone who's you know, for whatever reason is now in a position of being your teacher, and they immediately start wanting things from you. Like if they say, oh, well, I need you know, I need to pay my rent. I need $500 from you.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm moving. I need you to come. Actually, you know, having people come over and help you at the house is part of Magickal apprenticeship. I've always been a big believer in that, because I would go to Ebony's house and help him with things. We used to build computers back when the IBM 386 was something that people would actually pay money for. We used to build 386s and 486s just out of, you know, he had boxes of junk around his apartment, and we would sit and build computers all day. So that was neat.
Well, you know, I actually had a master, and God rest her soul, Master Angel. And she was really old school, really, really old school. The way she taught me, it was really an apprenticeship. She wasn't just a teacher, as in she was like a surrogate mother to me, and I will always respect her for that. But I've also had teachers who were good, and I've had teachers that had no right to call themselves a teacher. One example, okay, a good teacher that I will really, really, or what makes a good teacher to start off with, if you guys are wondering, what makes a good teacher? Are you learning? Right? Because that's the bottom line of the relationship. If I go to you and I say, can you please teach me Goetia? You could be an asshole about it. But if I'm learning Goetia, then at least you can say, well, I did teach you. I gave you what you asked for, right? However, if I go to you and I ask you to teach me Goetia, and I'm just having to put up with your ego all the time, I'm just having to put up with your power tripping and your overlordingship of how you're so much better of a mage than I am, and I know nothing, then that is not at all supporting the relationship of the teacher and the student. In other words, I'm wasting my time with you power tripping over me. Like, I had a person who one time wanted me to be his student, right? And I said, you know, for shits and giggles, I'll give it a shot. And then I observed, when I learn and I choose to have somebody as a teacher, I fucking listen. I really pay attention. And after some time, he would give me an instruction. The first instruction he gave me was kind of ludicrous. It perform the LBRP twice a day. I'm like, I already know the LBRP, but okay. I did it twice a day. Then talk to me in 2 weeks. Okay. So twice a day I did the LBRP. And then 2 weeks later, I said, all right, I did the LBRP twice a day. What now? And he straight up said, you did it wrong. Do it for another 2 weeks and come back to me. I was like, you fucking arrogant little shit. What was your basis of saying that? What?
I know exactly what he was doing. And I know how he would be able to tell out. Either this guy was just bullshitting you, or this was actually some pretty sublime stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It could be one or the other. I mean, maybe someone had done that to him, but the LBRP isn't just about learning the ritual. It isn't just about practicing. It's about banishing Earth. That's the whole purpose of the LBRP.
Yep.
But what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to gradually, it's like a solvent. Mm-hmm. It actually is a solvent in solve coagula.
Yep.
You're soaking the mud off your boots.
Yep.
And it's supposed to soften your world. And if he was sensitive enough, he would be able to tell if you had done it, and if it had enough of an effect. Maybe you have more mud on your boots. Maybe he actually couldn't tell.
Okay, that's a good thing. If that was the
logic, a good thing. But it may also have just been bullshitting you.
Yeah, he was doing this via text message. So I'm like, dude, we didn't even have any interaction. How the fuck are you supposed to even know I did it wrong? I could understand if he asked me to perform it in front of him and he said, you did it wrong, I want you to do it again. Give me something objective. But it was just basically him trying to lord his power over me. And I said, you know what? Fuck that. And the funny thing was this. Down the line, we had a bit of a falling out. And he kept on trying to push to teach me. And I just didn't want to learn from him. I just told him straight up, dude, I couldn't care less if you knew where the pages of the Book of Thoth itself lay. I don't want to learn shit from you. All right? I'd rather not know. Fuck off.
Yeah.
All right?
A real teacher won't pursue you like that. Mm-hmm. Because even if he is a grandmaster, he doesn't have to pursue you because he's the one with the knowledge.
Exactly.
And maybe it's just not a good fit.
Exactly.
So if someone is pursuing you to be your teacher, chances are they're not the one that you need to be looking for.
Very true. And another thing to keep in mind is this. Yeah, what?
Okay. I got one other big red flag, big flag. If they want to have sex with you,
Yeah.
or anything sexual, I've seen a lot of people that this is pretty common in Wicca, when they will be like, oh yeah, well we have, there it's actually written into the original Gardnerian Book of Shadows that
Uh-huh.
sometimes a love will develop between the teacher and student,
Mm-hmm.
and this is to be encouraged because it strengthens the instructional bond. Uh, Personally, now I've taught magic to my girlfriends before, but I do not ever recommend just starting to sleep with your students,
Mm.
because in my experience they stop learning.
True. One thing
It
about that is,
changes the whole dynamic.
yeah, if you have a teacher and student relationship that's active, like they're still learning under you, that's abuse. However, we're in a modern age nowadays. Okay, we have to admit to that. Like even in jujitsu gyms, there are black belts who end up dating their own purple belts or blue belts down the line. Okay, but what I'd like to say is that if that position of a teacher is being abused to get sexual incentives from a person, then that's a big red flag. But what if, for example, you were teaching this person and then you're done, they've learned, and then now you want to get to know them on a personal level? You see what I mean? It's kind of like that
Yeah,
old saying, like, can a boss date their subordinate? Not while they're working together, but what if that subordinate leaves? Then it's open season.
yeah. It's the
So
whole
what you
chain
got,
of command thing.
yeah. So you got to watch out
You
for
know?
people who will
I mean,
use
teachers
that.
not only get fired for that, they go to prison for that. Even if the student is over 18 and they're in college now, teachers get fired for that stuff.
Very true.
You
Very
know?
true. And what I'm seeing here too is, I just wanted to bring this up to everybody listening. When it comes to that kind of thing, any kind of teacher who demands it, like, oh, you want to learn from me, you have to have sex with me. Red flag. Run, run,
Yeah.
run. However, if like, because there's so many different things that could happen. Like, how different would it be that like somebody learned Aikido from me, left for another country, came back 5 years later, and we had a beer and we started dating? You see what I mean? Then that's one of
Yeah.
the gray areas there. But if they're your teacher,
That's
you're still learning,
yeah.
big no no.
Yeah, that's one thing, because even if the teacher just accepts it, like, because it does happen. There is that attraction that happens anytime you're working around someone.
Mhm.
So especially if you're doing high energy stuff like magic, you're gonna start thinking about alternate scenarios with them, but ultimately the relationship has to stay professional while they're learning.
Now, here's another thing
Mostly,
I've
if
observed.
not if for no other reason than just for um, the practical nuts and bolts of the relationship dynamic.
All right. Now it's going to bring me to my next question. Money exchange in learning. Are we in an age now where it's acceptable, which I think we are already, but in ye old times, I don't think Ebony ever charged you to learn from him. But nowadays, I actually think that Ebony, if he was still alive, God bless his soul, would actually ask you to enroll into his program. What do you think about that?
Um, he was teaching classes in ancient ways,
Uh-huh.
uh, for money, because that was just part of the, like, you go to the class because he had to give the store a cut. So there it's like, well, if he's doing a class, then yes, you pay him for the class. Now, I was a direct apprentice, so I wasn't giving him any money.
Mm-hmm.
But if he, if we, like I said, I'd go to his house and we would sit, and he would be schooling me all day about magic while we built computers.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like I was helping him directly with something that he needed to get done, and just he's shedding all of this magical knowledge on me while we're doing it. That's a whole different thing.
All right. Now
But
here's what
the
though.
idea of just directly giving him money, like showing up at his house, here's $100 for this month, and that comes off as really unethical to me.
There are pros and cons of either, though, from my experience, because I actually teach people professionally here in the Philippines. All right. One, this is the pro, okay, of the paid relationship. Very few people take free shit at value. Really.
Yes.
I've learned that the hard way. And when people pay for it, now it's already a professional agreement. Okay. In other words, we're agreeing to professionalize this. Hence, what ends up happening is I am kind of bound to teaching you what you paid for, and you are paying me for it. So it's also worth my time. Okay. So you can set the parameters there. However, there are those few who are really genuine of it, who deserve to learn. And at the end of the day, it's not really about the money, but because they're dedicated, you give them a lot of that extra sauce to it. But the
Well,
thing about,
there's that saying, what we obtain too cheaply, we esteem too lightly.
exactly.
They won't value it. There has to be an exchange, but there's a difference in levels. Like, say, someone who just comes to a class. Say if you rent out the conference room at a hotel and people come, they show up, and you do your seminar and they pay for that. That's one thing. But if you have an actual apprentice, someone that you are training in order to eventually replace you, someone who's going to be part of your lineage, part of your magical lineage. Like for me, it goes to Ebony, to Grady McMurtry, to Crowley directly. If you're going to be, inducting someone into your magical lineage, they're going to be at your house. They're going to be part of your life. That's a whole different level of student. That's a direct apprenticeship. Mm-hmm. So I just needed to make that distinction, because I would do classes in Ancient Ways. I've had, classes at my house where people come over, and they would we'd have the class, we'd walk them through some stuff, watch them do some rituals, but that's still just teacher student, not directly master and apprentice.
Very true. Very, very true. And here's the thing I've observed, though, in this day and age, though, a lot of things are professionalized. And I'll go as far as to say, compared to how I was trained by Master Angel, I was kind of shocked to see how much I can learn. The person that I've learned the most from the online, the Neo temple setting, as we call it, is none other than Jack Grail. Because number one, he gives very clearly the lessons. He makes himself accessible to students. And you're learning something. I mean, definitely, I will say, from all the online classes I've ever taken, I have learned the most from Jack Grail. However, I will go as far as to say that is probably just level one. There's definitely going to be a lot deeper stuff, heavier stuff that I'm sure he saves for only the most dedicated of people that money cannot buy. Okay. But in this new day and age, honestly, if you're paying for classes, for courses online, that's just level one. It's just initiate. You're not an adept. You're not a master. You're not a mage yet. You're still just an acolyte, for lack of a better word. However, in the old times, you couldn't pay for that. You got to be chosen. And when you're chosen, you fuck up, the teacher cuts you off, remember? Now, here's the reverse. From the freebie, that's where a lot of abuse comes to play. Because if you have a teacher who's benevolent, like you've had with Ebony, then you don't have a problem. But if they're teaching you for free, that's where the exchange is no longer money. It could be your time, your energy, your submission. You know what I mean? It's basically borderline cultish. There used to be
there always has to be an exchange. Yeah. That's the thing that a lot of people don't understand about magical work, teaching, or any kind of, if you're just crafting stuff. There has to be an exchange so it can be released. Mm-hmm. Because if I give you something, or if you steal something, or for whatever reason, if it's just a one-way deal, it's not really yours yet. Mm-hmm. Because it's still part of me, and you haven't backfilled it on my end. So if you go and you steal somebody's book, it's like, well, you don't really own it, so you don't really own the material that's in it. So everything that you learn is still going to be partly hampered by the fact that it really belongs to somebody else. So you always have to have an exchange, whatever that exchange is, just not, sex.
Yeah, but here's another thing, though. It's the sex is just the biggest red flag. But like, I remember there used to be an organization here in the Philippines that wanted to own the skills of their people, that they would say, and I won't mention their name, but they would say, all right, we're going to teach you all how to do channeling and tarot and magic, but You cannot read the tarot without the permission of the high tribunal, or you cannot do an event without the permission of the high tribunal. So basically, they were forming a cult. In other words, these people had no right to use their own abilities however they saw fit. Now in Mysterium, I tell people, look, take the course, learn. When you're done, do with it what it is you please. You learned it. You know what I mean? I tell this to my students all the time. I don't own you. Okay? I don't own you. But other organizations, other teachers might want to think that they do own you. They might want to think like, no, you can't appear on that show, or you can't talk to that person, or you can't do this. And that's the danger of the free lunch. Because sometimes people will say, well, you know, he's teaching me for free, so I should be willing to put up with this. No, that's a big red flag there.
Yeah, that would be... I actually had a dream at one point that I lived in this huge house. This was decades ago. I had this dream that I lived in this huge house with a whole bunch of apprentices, and they just took care of running the house and everything. And I had this big room up in the attic, and they would come to me for wisdom and whatever, and they would bring me food and all that. And it was a weird cult kind of dream. I was extremely uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody really wants that. I don't think anybody that's not the conducive kind of environment to learn these things, because that's where all those kind of troubles happen. That's where all those issues.
It's one thing. I mean, once you have someone's will subsumed into yours, you're responsible for them. They're like your children at that point, and that is a cult. Because what happens when the cult leader dies or leaves or does whatever? You know, if you spent a lifetime, and you used to see this a lot in the 70s, they would form these communes, and it's always this one charismatic guy and all of his followers, and they're all following, you know, Baba so-and-so. And then when he, you know, gets bored of it or goes insane or dies or whatever, the entire cult is just cut loose.
Agreed. But you know what? I actually want to go a bit on the positive, though. A green flag. Let's
go on the positive.
Yeah. I want to talk about a green flag when you have a teacher. If you're growing with this person, then that's a green flag. It's like if you see yourself improving, like, you know what? I asked Rob to teach me tarot, and he started teaching me tarot, and you know what? I can do it a lot better now than I could a month ago. That's a green flag. Or if you can actually say, I actually learned, I got it. I really understood how to do it. Then you could say, that's a green flag. What do you think? What's a green flag for you, my friend?
You know, the fact that Ebony showed up out of the blue and just was able to take the entire afternoon and bring me up to speed on a bunch of stuff, huge green flag. I was it felt natural. It felt right. We just sat and talked. We went to his house, and, you know, we spent, you know, the rest of the early evening just hanging out and talking. And he had like several bookcases, not just of books, but manuscripts, stuff that was photocopied that you can't get anywhere else. I mean, he actually had a priceless, irreplaceable library of stuff that Grady wrote. And he's just like, oh, yeah, if, you know, there's any of this stuff that you want, let me know. We'll go down to the copy place. I'll make you copies of it. The fact that he was able to, any given thing that I wanted to know, he was just forthcoming with it. He's like, look, I've got this. You want to learn about this? I got that. You know, and showing me perspectives that I hadn't thought of before. That basically he knew you fit together like a puzzle piece. And I know that sounds cliche and terrible and rom-com-y, but it was the exact right person to meet at that time. And like I said, you know, Ebony had his flaws. So do I. But that didn't really come into play until later. I did eventually outgrow him, and that was fine. He was what I needed at the time.
Which brings me to
it's good to know when to connect with a teacher. It's also good to know when it's time for you to level up and go beyond them.
Because it's going to bring me to another thing. One thing I've also observed with good teachers in the occult, they encourage asking questions. In other words, when you ask them a question, they answer you, unless of course it's something really deep, initiate stuff where they can easily say, I'm really not allowed to talk about that yet, but they're not going to make you feel stupid for asking questions. Because I've had people I've worked with that you ask them a question and they give you this condescending energy, like, oh, aren't you supposed to know that? Or, well, we discussed that the last time. Weren't you paying attention? It's like, dude, if I'm asking you a question, asshole, the least you can do is answer it to me.
Well, yeah, a teacher teaches.
Exactly.
First and foremost, if you come to them with now, Ebony, one of Ebony's minor flaws was he completely misunderstood the Socratic method.
Mm-hmm.
He thought the Socratic method was you asked him questions and then he would give you the answer. Mm-hmm. And that's not, I mean, are you familiar with the Socratic method?
Yeah.
Okay. It's the teacher asks the questions, but he asks the questions that you have to stop and think about. And it's to bring you forward. It's like the carrot and stick. He's got the carrot and he sets it where you can see it and you go get it. And then he puts down another carrot that you can see now, but you couldn't see before. And he leads you down the path with these questions, but you have to stop and think about it. But I like to teach by the Socratic method because it really does bond the student to what they're working with. And it's not just me telling them my perspective. I'm actually teaching them how to find their perspective on it.
True. That's a good one. We're going to talk about that next. Once again, calling you all in. Tonight's episode is brought to you by TORVENIUS. This lovely Goetia deck that's available along with his Goetia coin set. This is all Goetic spirits. Get it while it lasts. And of course, our friends at Anathema Publishing Limited with their ongoing Kickstarter this March 5th of the upcoming book by Jose Gabriel Alegra Sabogal, Semsilam, and the reissuance of Iao. Boys and girls, you really want to be part of this occult literary history and help bring these books to fruition because we need these books in our libraries. All right, so we're talking about people finding their own ways. Now, I've also observed, too, that there are some teachers, though, who cross too many lines. I openly say that my marriage was torpedoed because of a bad teacher that my ex-wife had, okay? My ex-wife got very much into energy healing, and one of her teachers really became a very meddlesome piece of shit. And she would use her position as a teacher to influence my ex-wife, which caused us a lot of problems, infinite problems. Now, from my point of view, when it comes to things like that, a teacher needs to know the boundaries. So if a teacher is continuously, insinuating themselves into things that don't involve them, like your marriage or your children. Like this is the same teacher who, when my son was reading the tarot, I made an Instagram post saying, so proud of my son, he earned his first $3 today from a tarot reading. She went on a fucking bender saying, kids shouldn't be selling money and tarot online, blah, blah, blah. It's against the negative energy, blah, blah, blah. And it caused a huge fight between me and my then wife. That is a clear example of when a teacher oversteps their boundaries. And they should not do that. What's your take on that?
Yeah. And once they start like trying to tell you how to run your life or getting into your life, that's going to be a problem. That was actually what ended up being the final stepping stone or the final straw between me and Ebony was he had broken up with his girlfriend. He was lonely. He was not doing well emotionally at one point. And so I gave him one of my girlfriends. She was in the country and her visa had expired. So I introduced them. I knew that they would hit it off, and they did. They ended up getting married later. But that was one of the issues was that he suddenly didn't want to share.
Okay.
And I don't know. I don't understand it. I've always been poly. They teach you in kindergarten, share your toys or nobody's going to want to play with you at all. That's me. I'm not trying to tell anyone else how to live their life. Just that, my way's better. But it did end up becoming a sticking point because he kept harping on her to stop seeing me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? At this point, I got to let you go because it's not it's not healthy for him or you or me. And it's like, I've got other friends I can hang out with. And I'd kind of outgrown Ebony at that point. I'd learned what I needed to learn from him.
Mm-hmm.
We were just kind of, at that point, we were more colleagues than master and apprentice.
Yep.
But having that, starting to bring in the other mundane stuff, other mundane aspects of your life into it. And I'm not going to say it's always over a woman, but
could be so many other things. There's so many things.
It's not always over a woman, but a woman will always throw things off. If you start, like, if you're both dating the same woman, or they start trying to influence women in your life,
or money for that example,
or money, it just becomes a huge, because everybody needs money.
I don't want
everybody needs money to live.
I don't think it's a woman that's going to cause it, because somebody might misquote you and try to cancel you. I think it's really
no. In this case, it wasn't. She did not do anything wrong. Mm-hmm. This was fine. It was the whole two guys dating the same woman thing. There was jealousy going on. There was insecurity going on. It became a huge thing. But it's the same thing with the money. Anything that you need that becomes like an emotional need for you, mm-hmm. is going to be leverage that someone or just random fate can start like using that like a pry bar to pull you apart.
Which brings
because everybody needs money. Everybody has to pay the rent. Everybody's got bills. So you start making the master financially dependent on his students, it becomes an issue.
Definitely. Now here's another problem that people miss out on. A lot of people tend to put their teachers on a pedestal, and that sets them up for the shaft. Why? All right. Number one, when I teach people, I tell them, boys and girls, A, I never once called myself Master Robert. Do not call me that. B, I am neither enlightened, ascended, or illuminated. I take smelly shits, I eat steak, and I watch MMA. I am a human. I am imperfect, and I get angry. However, I can teach you a very, very specific set of skills. If you are okay with that, then I can teach you. But if you want me to be the Messiah, find another teacher. However, there are some teachers who will play that role to the boot just to manipulate their students. A lot of teachers will play the father figure, the big brother figure, the mother figure in order to control someone who has that issue in their life. That's a red flag. Okay. Manly P. Hall said it clearly in his book, Words to the Wise, which is a very good book for the upcoming occultists, that if you meet a teacher and they seem too holy, too blessed, and too ascended, run.
Yeah, I may be a master. I don't have to be your master. I have never accepted students, they say, how should I address you? You just call me Wade. Mm-hmm. I'm a regular person. I know some things that you need to know. That doesn't make me better than you. That doesn't make me illuminated, ascended, or any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. Anyone who tells you they're ascended, but while they're sitting there in their meat suit, is probably lying. Mm-hmm. If someone, shows up in, a glowing purple outline in the, hovering over your bed in the middle of the night and tells you they're ascended, that has a little more credibility.
Mm-hmm. And they're also intangible too at the same time, because that's another thing I've noticed, that like a lot of people really want to live up to that facade, and that actually tends to spoil the pot with so many people, that they say, I once trusted this teacher, this mentor. Like, it's happened in so many industries. It happened with John of God in Brazil, if you know that story, where he had like this huge plantation, and people, even Oprah went down there because apparently he could heal people of cancer, only to find out he was a sex cultist. It happened with what's his name? It happened with Bikram in the yoga community as well, where there were issues like that, where you have to understand that these people are usually people. And if you look at them as people, then they will have an easier time following integrity. But if you put them on a pedestal, some people don't know how to get off of that. Like one person said to me, Rob, you eat meat? That's not ascended. Then I tell them, then I guess I'm not ascending at all. It's not my job to do that.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm the human teacher. I'm not looking to be the Christ teacher or the Messiah teacher. There are other people who can do that. So if you have a teacher who is human, that's already a green flag. But if they seem like a saint, chances are you're going to have a problem down the line. And it also,
Yeah, and
go ahead.
And honestly, if someone is not just presenting themselves as more than human, like if you go to one of these ashrams where they have you go in there and you're sitting in the temple and you're meditating and you're chanting the teacher's name to get more of a spiritual communion with the teacher and kind of directly funnel his essence or whatever. That's very cultish behavior.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. I'm not going to say that it's impossible for a teacher to be like this, but it's extremely rare. I mean, this is the kind of thing you'd see in a Tibetan monastery where the person is so holy, so enlightened, and has completely subsumed themselves into the work that they can directly transmit it to you. That's one thing. You're not going to find this person on Craigslist,
or on Facebook.
Yeah, or on Facebook or any of that. You're only going to find them by climbing that mountain. True. And knowing how to get there.
And here's another thing I've noticed, that great skill also doesn't make great teacher. Did you know that? Like, I have an example.
I know that.
This is part of my journey in jiu-jitsu. Okay, I tell people time and time again that I'm a substandard jiu-jitsero. I'm a blue belt. I'm proud of it, but I'm not a great one. I have been trained by some good people. Like, some of them were world champion level, national champion level. But I'll always remember that the best teacher of them all was this simple guy who used to be a school teacher. That I said to him, anytime you're teaching, I would rather learn from you than from the epic level 200 jiu-jitsero, who speaks Portuguese and spent 16 months in Brazil. Because the act of teaching itself is a skill, and not all people know how to do it. You know what I mean? Not all people get how to teach. They can do it themselves, but they don't know how to transmit the information. So sometimes, like you say, oh no, but he's the best. He's the best at doing. Is he the best at teaching?
Mm-hmm. One of the issues that I had, the first problem I had with Ebony was that he had gotten to a point where he knew what he was doing, but he wasn't quite bringing people along with him. Like, we were doing a class on the magical tools. Actually, it was a class in Ancient Ways. It was on opening rituals. And he was going through and he's saying, okay, here's how you do this thing, and you do this thing, and then you do your ritual. And then you have like your closing and all that. I was like, hang on here. You skipped like the important part. What do you mean you do the ritual?
What's the ritual?
And well, that's yeah, exactly. It's like when you're looking through a Chilton's manual, it tells you exactly how to find your valve cover bail, how to open it, how to remove the valve cover, how to check the seal, and then step 4, adjust the valves. You're like, well, wait a second, I need to know exactly how this is done. But so we actually had to go through, and he's like, well, it's whatever ritual you happen to be doing. There's tons of rituals, maybe just whatever your spell is. That part I knew. But he had kind of glossed over the important part of it at the time because he knew what he was doing, but none of the students were kind of up to the same speed yet. So we kind of got there. So it's teaching, like you're saying, teaching is definitely a skill. You have to be able to know where your students are and what they need. And again, it all comes down to communication.
True, because like as a teacher myself, okay, I always do check and balances with my students to see, do you guys get the topic? Am I making sense to you? If not, do I need to reword it in Tagalog? Do I need to reword it in the vernacular? Do I have to have it translated? Do you have questions? Because the problem is a lot of these high-end practitioners sometimes expect you to know what they know. It's like, you fucking donkey dick. If they knew what you knew, they wouldn't be asking you. You see what I mean?
Right.
As a teacher, you have to take honor in the fact that the students are coming to you with that vulnerability to say, teacher, I don't know. Can you please make me know? And when you
Yeah.
shit on it, you know what I mean? Then you're not learning anything. So, like, even when I do my classes, I really get it to the point like, okay, each and every one of you need to know these things. This needs to be clear. And if you don't understand it, what can we do to help you to understand it? Like, for example, the LBRP. If you don't know how to do that, if you've never done that, that is a fucking tricky ritual to do with the Kabbalistic cross, with the analysis of the keyword, all of these things. Reading it off the bat, you'd be like, what the fuck? Okay. But if you have a teacher who will actually take the time and say, okay, what part of it did you get? What part of it didn't you get? You see what I mean? And then people are going to say, oh, but that's spoon feeding. So they're learning. You know what I mean? Because when they go from the very beginning, they don't know shit. Now, if they've been with you for fucking 15 years, then yes, they're mooching off of you. But at the beginning, you kind of got to give them the training wheels.
Well, that's the thing. Everybody uses spoons. Mm-hmm. So if you're spoon feeding people, some of them will get it right away. Some of them won't. So you got to kind of, especially if you have multiple students, you need to bring them all up to the same speed, mm-hmm. and then move the class along when it gets. That's the benefit of apprenticeship over regular student classes, is he'll know. Is okay. Let's see you perform an LBRP. If you're in a class, half your students are going to be like, question, what did you just say? I don't even know what you just said, let alone how to do the thing that you told me to do. That's one thing. But if you're talking to someone, you have a one-on-one apprenticeship, and he's like, okay, you start off with your LBRP. Are you familiar with that? You're like, yes, I am. I can do it. Like, okay, show me. And you do one in front of him. He's like, that's good. Now, from there, we're going to move on and do this. If it's something you already know in a direct apprenticeship, the teacher will be able to recognize if you know it. Mm-hmm. And that's why I was curious about that when the guy said, no, you didn't do it right. Go back, do another 2 weeks and get back to me. But then if it's over text, if he didn't even observe you doing the ritual,
not at all.
Probably not a good sign.
Yeah. And that's another thing to share too, because like people tend to ask, but Rob, you teach people, but do you have an apprentice? And you know what I tell them? Yeah, I've had apprentices and they fucking hate it. Because if I am going to have you as an apprentice, you're going to learn the best, but I'm going to turn you into titanium. I'm going to forge the fuck out of you, because that's the highest privilege of learning over me. I'm not asking you to do my laundry. I'm not asking you to pick up my kids. But when I'm teaching you, you're going to hate every minute of it, because I want you to be the best. I'm going to push you so hard, and I'm going to give you every opportunity to quit. Like, do you want to quit? Okay. And I'll tell them beforehand, before we start the apprenticeship, like my last apprentice, Draco, he came here for the summer, and he's my godson. And I told him beforehand, I gave him a welcome lunch. I told him, Draco, you're like my firstborn. I love you. This isn't going to be easy. And when I'm teaching you, I'm not going to be your godfather. I'm going to be your master, because you are my apprentice. And there were times during the training, he nearly broke down into tears. There was even one time he did. But the good thing was there were other students there who learned under me, who actually went to him and said, the harder he pushes you, the more he believes in you. Yeah. You see what I mean?
I've had apprentices that I'm a taskmaster. If someone comes to me and they're, if I'm working with an apprentice and I'm like, okay, we're doing these things, I want to see you make an amulet. And he goes and he makes an amulet and he brings it to me, and I'm like, this is good. This is good. Do it again. And go and do it again. Say, do a different one. Show me one that does, bring me a Mars amulet. Bring me something else. And they do it again. And, but it's also, again, it's like right in person. And I'll see it. I'll be like, okay, this is great. Do this other one. That's a passing grade. If I just be, if he brings it to me and I'm like, you can do better, do it again. That it's you're getting that kind of direct feedback, which is good, but also you can't really take it personally.
Mm-hmm.
If they come back and they're like, okay, well, your task is to, get me a house. You're like, I don't know about that. But if he comes back and says, okay, your task is to get yourself a house. I want to see how you can do it. That's the kind of thing like when you're at the end of an apprenticeship and he starts throwing tests at you.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, it's a time for because when an apprenticeship is complete, I will always throw them a test of all their skills. They'll have to do, multiple practical exercises to show that they can actually have an effect in the real world. And it's got to be something that I can independently verify.
Mm-hmm.
If they say, oh, yeah, well, the next hurricane that's announced to make landfall, you have to, dispel this hurricane before it makes landfall. And that's something that I can check. I mean, that'll be on the news.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. If it's a big task and you can actually hit them with something like that, it's not because I'm being a dick to you. It's because I want to see that you are doing the very best that you can.
True. Because, I've observed, Wade, a good magical teacher, believe it or not, one actual green flag of a good magical teacher, they will give you reading material. And this is what gives the red flags and the green flags from serious students and shitty students. Because I remember I had a person who asked to learn sorcery under me, and I gave her a book, and I said, read this. Let's talk in a week. Okay? You're not my apprentice. You don't deserve that. But if you really are serious, read this. Let's talk in a week. Never touched the book. And said, you want things handed to you. I'm not going to give you shit handed. Okay? 98% of your ability to pick up magical power is the magic that you earn in hours and hours with your nose in the books. Saying, shit, I just researched a new spell, a new ritual. Fuck, I want to give this a try. In other words, you've earned that versus if I'm just going to just hand it to you. And basically, I'm telling you not just how to fish. I'm telling you where to fish, but you don't want to cast your line. You see what I mean? And it's still a at the end of the day.
If a teacher gives you something to do, say it's like, okay, I'm going to teach you the LBRP. Uh-huh. I've given you read it in the books, but you haven't actually seen it performed. I'm going to do this with you here. We're both going to do it at the same, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you how it's done. And then we're both going to do it at the same time. You're going to copy what I do. We're going to do this. I'm going to watch you do it by yourself and come back in a week. And I expect you to be 10 times better, which means that I've given them stuff to go home and do, and I'm expecting them to practice it, which is going to involve reading. It's going to involve a lot of doing. If they come back in a week, I couldn't actually find any time. You couldn't find time in a week to do a ritual that takes you a minute and a half. You couldn't find any time at all. Then I'm starting to think, well, if you don't have time to do this work, you don't have time to do the magic.
Very true. One of the things I used to wrap up today's episode was a term that I use for the people I teach magic to, not the other classes like tarot and IA, because ultimately there's a certain level of public consumption that comes there. But when it comes to magic, I always tell my students there, 1,000 excuses never equates to a single result. Right?
Yeah.
So if I ask a student to do something, I didn't have time, this and that. No, it's not that you didn't have time. You didn't make time. And everything that you're learning magically from me will stack. So this is the last thing I'm going to tell you. This is a red flag. Watch out for a teacher who's got a shit ton of theory, but practical shit. He'll talk on and on and on about how at 1912, Victor Neuenberg and let's say Aleister Crowley went to the Algerian desert and they did all these theories, all this knowledge, all this lore. But he can't even teach you a single ritual. Remember, people learn to do shit. You know what I mean? So gone are the days of the gentleman's club sitting around in their ties and in their blazers, drinking whiskey, talking about, Dr. Westcott said this and that. You're just basically intellectually masturbating one another. Magic is a practice. It needs to be practiced.
Exactly.
To be
And
done.
if and if your master is teaching you, say, okay, you need to go and read about the LBRP, but he doesn't show you how to do it. He doesn't walk you through it. This is kind of like if you're teaching martial arts, and it's like, okay, here's how you properly perform. Like if you're doing something and he's okay, and you lop sao and do this, and you're like, oh, hold up, I don't speak Korean. What is lop sao? And then if he can show you 5 different applications of the lop sao, and then because if he's expecting you to come back in a week and know this, then you really need to walk a student through it, make sure they can do it in front of you, and then give them a week to practice it. So say, if you're like, oh yeah, I want to give you the LBRP and teach you this. It's not like Dungeons and Dragons where you level up and you just know this spell. You actually have to practice these rituals. You have to practice the instruction that the teacher gives you, so that when you come back, you can show him that you put the time in.
Good. And here's another thing I wanted to share with you guys, okay? For you budding magical teachers out there, okay? If you can find a way of teaching somebody magic who doesn't fully understand the native language that you speak, you are a good teacher. Think about it. Okay? In other words, let's say, Wade, you speak only German, a little bit of English, but I managed to find a way of teaching you magic, even though your English is limited. That means that I have simplified it so easily that a non-native speaker was able to understand it. And that makes a good teacher, if you ask me, because what good are all these terms and information if people don't get it?
One of the skills that I actually teach students when it comes to air magic is English. I call it English to English translation. And this is why you'll hear me say something like 5 times, 5 different ways. So if, say, you find something that say, okay, I'm going to teach you this. This is how I explain it. This is how I understand it. But I also know that this person does say, for example, martial arts. I'll say, if this was a martial arts thing, this is what you would be doing. I'll translate what I'm saying into something they already understand. Because there's a lot of times that, and this is just a skill for everything. If you say something, a lot of times Crowley had a great quote that the vast majority of people are completely impervious to facts.
Yep. That
they will listen to everything you're saying, and they'll hit on one word that excites their prejudices, and they'll ignore everything else you're saying. When I was working with Vicky, when she was grooming me to get into Wicca, or Alexandrian Gardnerian witchcraft at the time, she wanted me to write up my understanding of a particular ritual we had done, and I used the word Eucharist because that's what this particular ritual had produced, was a Eucharist. And she went through, she says, no, none of this. What do you mean? She says, well, you called it a Eucharist. That's a Christian thing. I'm like, it's the same thing. But you hit on the one word that excited their prejudices, and it came back around, and she just said, well, okay, you didn't understand any of this because you think it's Christian. I'm like, it's not that I think it's Christian. It's just, this is the word, this is the thing we did. So you have to be able to say things multiple different ways to make sure they understand, especially if it's something where you can translate it into something they already know. Like if somebody knows, if somebody builds their own cars, and you can sit there and say, yeah, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be, shop stripping your carburetor and taking all the parts, cleaning it, replacing the parts that are worn, and putting it back together. If you can translate that into something they already understand, that's the hallmark of a good teacher. It's not always, yes, you need translation from German to English, but sometimes you need English to English too.
True. It's very Mr. Miyagi. So once again, tonight's episode is brought to you by our friends at Anathema Publishing Limited. Guys, come on. Really, if you're tuning into this episode, I I am always excited when I know that Anathema is coming out with something new, and with this upcoming work of theirs, they are not only releasing the new work of Jose Sabogal's work, but they're also bringing back IAO, All Fight Iconography, which I missed out on. And if we hit the goal, which we will hit the goal, it's going to open doors for a lot of people. So, Anathema, thank you for leading the charge when it comes to publishing quality occult books. Your books are both masterpieces and literary pieces of gem, literally speaking. And of course, our friends Axel Torvenius for the amazing Goetia set. Thank you very much for that. And we're still looking forward to our end of the season guest. We have announced that it's going to be Michael Ford. He already agreed. We're just trying to get his schedule. But once we get that, it's going to close season 3, and we're going to have an action-packed season 4. So once again, thank you all for tuning in to Rob and Wade's Magic.tv Presents. See you all next week.